to get started, I want you guys to think about the fact that every single person is known for something, right? If you hear someone's name, whether it's a famous person or even someone that you know, you automatically have some kind of thoughts that come into your mind, right? They're known for something. So let's just try it out. I'm going to say a name, and you shout out what that person is known for, okay? So first name, Michael Jordan. Basketball. Free throw, good athlete. Right. Second name, Einstein. Smart. Science. Yeah. So you instantly think, oh, he's known because he was smart. Okay. Third name, Hitler. Evil. Nazis. Bad. Okay. So he had a bad reputation. Okay, what about this name? Abraham Lincoln. President. Honest. Assassinated. Civil War. Okay, good work. So just like those famous people are known for things, known for being honest, known for being smart, known for being athletic, we are also known for things. Can I have you unplug that? It just randomly goes off. It has a mind of its own. And you can probably think through like your friends and what they're known for at school or on a sports team or something like that. I have always been known as someone who is loud and outgoing and likes to laugh a lot. If you ask people from pretty much any phase of my life, that's what I'm kind of known for. Okay, I've never been described as someone that was quiet or shy, and I love to laugh. And I don't know about you guys, but I always find myself, hey guys, can I have your attention? Yes. Gentlemen? I don't know about you guys, but I always seem to be the one that's laughing when you're not supposed to be laughing, right? So like maybe when like you're supposed to be quiet in school or during a sermon or something, like a funny thought will just like pop in my mind. I don't even know where it came from. Or like I'll see something funny and you know, you kind of start to giggle. You're like, and then I start laughing and I can't stop laughing. So in high school, hang on, we're not doing questions. Okay, in high school, that would happen to me sometimes. And I'd be in class and I would be trying so hard not to laugh. And I would start laughing so much, I would get sent to the hallway until I could compose myself. And then I could come back into class. Okay, so I was known as the girl that laughed a lot, that was outgoing, loud, whatever. But another thing that I can say, and I'm kind of excited that I can say this to you guys, as when I was in high school, I was also known as the girl who didn't go out and party and who didn't sleep around, who didn't get involved in those kind of things. I had a whole group of friends that were into those things, but people around school knew that I didn't do those things. So I want you guys to think about, what are you known for? When people hear your name in conversation, what do they think about right away? Do they think, oh, she's so nice. She like reaches out to everyone around her and makes sure they feel included. Or do they think, oh, she is so smart, or he is so athletic, or he is so kind? Or do they think negative things like, oh, he's a bully. He's not very nice to the new people, or if people hear hear your name and they find out that you come to youth group, are they surprised? Like, oh, I didn't know they loved Jesus, you know? Or is it like, oh yeah, like I definitely see that in their life, that they are a follower of Jesus. So I want you guys just to think about that, like process, like what are you known for? When people hear your name, what do they think about? And tonight we're going to talk about Daniel, and he was in the Old Testament. And the cool thing about Daniel is that he was known for a few different things: for honoring God and for being dedicated to prayer. Now, I don't know about you, but those are some pretty cool things to be known for, right? That even thousands of years later, after he's died and his story here on earth has ended, that's what we know him by. And that's pretty cool. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of the background story before we dig into our Bibles. So back in this time, kind of towards the beginning of Daniel's life, there was a king named Nebuchadnezzar. Can you guys say Nebuchadnezzar? And when Nebuchadnezzar was ruling over the land, he had brought in some boys or some guys with him to rule the land. And when he was picking who he wanted to help him, he picked the best of the best, okay? He picked the men that were handsome and smart and loyal, okay? And Daniel was one of those men that he picked to come help him kind of rule the kingdom. And during this time that Daniel was kind of helping Nebuchadnezzar, hey guys, can I have your attention? If you're distracted by your friends, you can separate yourself. That's cool. During this time, Daniel continued to honor God. He continued to obey God and do what God asked him to do. And because of that, God blessed him and gave him the ability to interpret dreams and visions. So during this time, King Nebuchadnezzar and a few other people had some dreams, and Daniel was able to interpret them for them. And because of that, he became very respected and honored in the kingdom. Okay, people looked up to him because he had these abilities. And later on in Daniel's life, after King Nebuchadnezzar has died, there's another king a little later on. And his name was King Darius. And when he became king, he took the kingdom and he divided it into 120 different provinces, okay? He divided it up into 120 different things. And he assigned a man over each single one of those provinces, okay? And those men, I think he referred to them as the high officers, okay? So there was a high officer over each province, and then he selected 3 men to be over the high officers. And one of those 3 men was Daniel, okay? So you have 120 high officers, and then you have the 3 men called the administrators, and one of those was Daniel. Okay, so he was kind of a big deal. He was pretty high up in the kingdom. And while he was in that position, King Darius noticed that he was doing a great job, okay, at what he was doing. So King Darius made this plan. He came up with this idea that he actually wanted to make Daniel in charge over the entire empire. But when the 2 other men that were administrators with him found out this plan, they got jealous. And they wanted to stop this plan. So that's where we're going to dig into the story. So open your Bibles to Daniel 6. Daniel is in the Old Testament, past Psalms, Proverbs, keep going, kind of towards the end of the Old Testament. It's Ezekiel, Daniel, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel. If you get to Joel, Amos, Obadiah, you're too far. Back up a little bit. And go to Daniel 6, and we're going to start in verse 4. Turn in there. All right, and I'm going to start reading. It says, "Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs. But they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn him. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion." So these men were trying to find something wrong with Daniel, trying to find something that they could accuse him of, and they couldn't find anything. He was faithful. He was trustworthy. He always did the right thing. And so they realized the only thing that they could do was go against his religion. Now, one of the things that they knew Daniel always did every day was pray. 3 times a day, Daniel would set aside time in his day to pray. And these men knew that about him. So they thought, if we can go against that, we can get Daniel. So they came up with a plan. And remember, King Darius really liked Daniel at this time, okay? So the guys got together and they came up with this plan that they were going to make a law that no one was allowed to pray to or worship anybody else, any other god, except for King Darius. Okay, so they come to King Darius and they present it in a way, they're like, oh, we love you so much. And we think you should be prayed to. We think you should be honored. So how about you make this law that people can't pray to anybody else for 30 days? And the king, he's like, okay, he kind of considered the idea. And they said, and if someone breaks that law, if they pray to anybody else but you, they're going to be thrown into a lion's den. They're going to be put in with the lions that are going to devour them. Okay? Now, King Darius wasn't thinking about Daniel, right? At the time. And he signed off on the law. Now, back in those times when a king would sign off on a law, there was no going back. Okay? That was it. So he signed off on that law, and it became a law. You could not, for 30 days, pray to anybody else except for King Darius. So, let's see what Daniel does, how he responds. Jump down to verse 10. But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home, knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with his windows open towards Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he always had done, giving thanks to God. Then the officials went together to Daniel's house and found him praying and asking God for help. So they went straight to the king and reminded him about his law. Didn't you sign a law that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except for you, your majesty, will be thrown into a den of lions? Yes, the king replied. That decision stands. It is an official law of the Medes and the Persians that cannot be revoked. Then they told the king that Daniel, one of the captives from Judah, was ignoring your law. He still prays to God 3 times a day. So I just want you guys to picture this, okay? So these guys come up with this plan against Daniel, and then they go see him, and what's Daniel doing? Praying. He chooses to still to pray and to honor God. And so these guys go to the king, and they're like, hey, didn't you make this law? They're trying to trap him, right? And I kind of imagine it like this. I think those of you who have siblings, you've probably done this with your siblings before. I know I've done it. It's like when you're eating like candy with your brother and sister, and your mom's like, okay, guys, no more candy before dinner, right? And then your mom turns away, and your little brother or little sister like gets some more candy and eats it. So you go to your mom, and you're like, hey, Mom, didn't you say like we're not allowed to have candy before dinner? And your mom's like, yeah, I did say that. Well, Sally over there is eating candy, right? Like the only reason you asked that question was to get your sibling in trouble, right? You knew the answer. That was the same with these guys, right? They knew that the king had made that law. They were just asking to get Daniel in trouble, right? So jump back into verse 14. It says, hearing this, the king was deeply troubled, and he tried to think of a way to save Daniel, because remember, he loved Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. In the evening, the men went together to the king and said, Your Majesty, you know that according to the law of Medes and the Persians, no law that the king signed can be changed. So at last, the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you. So, what does Daniel do? We'll finish up the story here in a minute, but what does Daniel do when he finds out this law has been made? Yeah, he continues to pray. He continues to honor God. So there's a few things I think we can learn from Daniel in this story. The first thing is he didn't let his circumstances change his prayer life. Okay? Just because this law had been made against him, or just because people were against his religion, he probably was made fun of because of it sometimes. He didn't let that change his relationship with God or his prayer life. His relationship with God and his time he spent in prayer was high priority in his life, and he didn't let anything else change that. And the second thing is, prayer was a priority in his life. He didn't make any excuses to not spend time praying with God. And I think a lot of times, especially in our culture, we come up with all kinds of excuses of why we don't have time to pray, right? Maybe it's like, well, you're like, okay, I get up, I have to get ready, I have to eat breakfast, I got to go to school, I come home, or like I have practice after school, I come home, I've got homework, I got to do my chores, I got to do this, and then I go to bed. I don't have any time to pray, right? But I want you to think about this. Daniel was like second in command over a kingdom. Talk about a lot to do, right? And he still set aside time in his day 3 times a day, specifically to spend time in prayer. That's how important it was to him. We make time for the things that are important for us in life. So do you set aside time to pray, to spend time talking to your Father, your Creator? And the third thing is, obviously, Daniel was known to be a man of prayer and a man of faith. Because when these guys were trying to come up with something against him, they knew that he would still continue to pray, right? They knew that his relationship with God was top priority in his life, and that's what they had to attack. Are you known by that? Are you known as a boy or a girl of faith and of prayer? So let's jump back into the story. I'm going to read verse 16 again and then finish out the story. So it said, at last the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, may your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles, so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and couldn't even sleep all night. Very early the next morning, the king got up and hurried out to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you serve so faithfully, able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel answered, long live the king. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me. For I have been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be lifted out from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. Then the king gave orders to arrest the men who had maliciously accused Daniel. He had them thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. The lions leaped on them and tore them apart before they even hit the floor. That's a crazy ending, right? These guys that went against Daniel were then thrown into the lion's den and killed themselves. And their wives and children. Isn't that crazy? So not only did Daniel survive the lion's den, he came out without even a scratch on his body. God protected him because he honored God and stayed faithful to him. God promises us in Deuteronomy 31:8. You don't have to turn there. I'm just going to read it. It says, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He will be with you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you. So the Lord promises us that he will never leave us or forsake us. He will never abandon us. Now, that doesn't mean you aren't going to go through hard times, right? Daniel was still persecuted for his faith, right? People were still against him. He was still put in the lion's den. But God never left him, right? And we know that is true. We can know that is true in our lives as well. So as I close, I want you to think about 3 questions, okay? Number 1, what are you known for? When people hear your name, what are you known for? Are you known as a follower of Jesus? Someone who is dedicated to God and who spends time praying? Or are you known for something else? Number 2, is prayer a priority in your life? Now, the Bible tells us that we are commanded to pray continuously all throughout the day, no matter what you're doing, as you're eating, as you're hanging out with your friends, as you're doing your schoolwork. We should be continually praying to God. But it's also very important to set aside specific time. Daniel had a specific place and a specific time 3 times a day that he prayed. He went into his room, he faced towards Jerusalem 3 times a day. Do you have a specific place and a specific time that you can pray? I want you to think about that. What time in my day can I set aside for prayer? Maybe it's right when you get up in the morning. Maybe it's as you eat your breakfast. Maybe it's as you eat lunch. Maybe it's right before you go to bed. Maybe it's right after you get out of school. What time in your day can you set aside to spend in prayer? Is it a priority in your life? And 3, do you trust that God is always with you? Because honestly, if you think about that as truth, that will change the way you live your life. If you know that you have a relationship with Jesus and he is always with you, that will give you confidence to live your life for him, to know that he will never leave you. So I want you guys to think about those questions as you leave.